It's May 945. The Third Reich is collapsing into dust. But if you looked at the high-ranking generals of the SS and the German High Command, you wouldn't know it. These men considered themselves the absolute pinnacle of human evolution. They were the warrior kings of Europe, wrapped in custom-tailored leather greatcoats, dripping with iron crosses and carrying silver-tipped swagger sticks. As the Allies closed in, these generals packed their luxury luggage, loaded up their Mercedes-Benz staff cars, and drove to the American lines to surrender. They expected a grand, gentlemanly affair under the old European rules of war. A captured general was supposed to be treated like royalty. They expected an American general to meet them, offer a crisp salute, share a glass of whiskey, and provide them with private quarters and personal servants. They were about to receive the most jarring, humiliating reality check of their entire lives. Because waiting for them at the checkpoint wasn't a fellow general in a tailored suit. It was a 19-year-old first class from Brooklyn, covered in mud, who hadn't slept in 3 days, and who did not give a single damn about a German officer's rank. When a German general approached an American checkpoint, he would typically step out of his vehicle, strike a rigid posture, and offer a salute. The Geneva Convention actually stated that prisoners of war were required to salute officers of the capturing army, and officers were to return it. The SS generals demanded this respect. They would literally stand there, holding their salute, waiting for the American enlisted men to snap to attention. The American GIs just stared at them. To the GI, this man wasn't a respected adversary. He was the reason the GI was currently standing in a freezing European ditch instead of being home drinking a Coca-Cola. When the German general would inevitably bark, "Where is your salute?" or "I demand to see an officer of equal rank," the American response was brutally simple. They racked the bolts of their Thompson submachine guns. The GIs would tell the heavily decorated aristocratic generals to shut their mouths, put their hands on their heads, and get in the back of a standard-issue 2.5-ton cargo truck with the rest of the captured infantrymen. No luxury cars, no private quarters, just the dirt floor of a canvas truck. The humiliation didn't stop at the road. Once the generals were processed into the POW camps, the real stripping of their dignity began. The American troops had a specific hatred for the SS, the fanatical paramilitary wing of the Nazi Party responsible for the worst atrocities of the war. SS officers knew they were marked men. So many of them tore off their collar tabs and tried to blend in with the regular German army. But the Americans knew a secret. Every member of the SS had their blood type tattooed under their left armpit. When high-ranking generals, men who had commanded hundreds of thousands of troops, arrived at the camps, the GIs didn't care about their protests. American sergeants ordered these proud, aristocratic men to strip off their tailored tunics and stand bare-chested in the freezing mud with their arms raised in the air like common criminals. American privates would walk down the line, shining flashlights into the armpits of generals, looking for the ink. If they found the tattoo, the general was instantly, violently pulled from the line. In that moment, all their power, their medals, and their titles evaporated. They were exposed, helpless, and completely at the mercy of the American soldier. There was another aspect of the surrender that absolutely shattered the German ego: the American GI's obsession with souvenirs. In the German military tradition, a general's dagger, his medals, and his swagger stick, a short baton carried as a symbol of authority, were sacred objects. To touch them was an insult to their honor. The American GI saw them as excellent trade currency for a carton of Lucky Strike cigarettes. As the generals were being processed, GIs would casually walk up and snatch the silver-tipped swagger sticks right out of their hands. They would unpin the iron crosses from their chests and take their custom-engraved Luger pistols. The German generals would scream in protest, citing the Geneva Convention rules about officer property. The GIs just laughed. One famous account describes a captured German general furiously demanding his swagger stick back from an American private. The private simply looked at him, tapped the stick against his own helmet and said, "Not anymore, Fritz. This is going to my kid brother in Ohio." The absolute disrespect stung the German high command worse than a physical blow. The final nail in the coffin of the master race myth was manual labor. Under the rules of war, captured officers could not be forced to do manual work. But American camp commanders found creative ways around this, especially for the SS. Generals who had spent the last 5 years ordering the destruction of entire nations were suddenly handed brooms, shovels, and latrine buckets. If an SS general demanded a salute or complained about the food, an American sergeant would hand him a toothbrush and tell him to scrub the barracks floor. To see an SS Obergruppenführer, a man who once held the power of life and death over millions, forced to sweep a dirty street while an American teenager with a rifle chewed gum and watched him, was the ultimate poetic justice. The American GI did not defeat the German High Command with just tanks and artillery. They defeated them psychologically. The SS and Wehrmacht generals demanded salutes because their entire worldview was built on a strict, unbreakable hierarchy of superiors and inferiors. The American army, made up of plumbers, farmers, mechanics, and teachers, didn't care about European hierarchies. They cared about winning the war and going home. By refusing to salute, by stripping them of their medals, and by treating them like traffic hazards rather than royalty, the American GI systematically dismantled the myth of the Nazi Superman. The generals demanded respect. What they got was a reality check that echoed through history. If that moment hit you as hard as it hit those soldiers, if you felt the tension, the defiance, and the courage it took to stand tall in the face of power, then don't just scroll past it. Stories like this aren't just history. They're reminders of what real bravery looks like when everything is on the line. Can you imagine standing face to face with some of the most feared SS generals of World War II, knowing that every eye in the room is on you and the world is watching? That was exactly the moment these American soldiers faced, and what they did next wasn't just a small act of defiance, it was a statement that echoed far beyond that room. Their courage, their refusal to bow down, and the way they held their heads high is something that stays with you long after the story ends. If this story hit you the way it hit me, then it deserves more than just a passing glance. Moments like this remind us of the power of standing up for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against us. They teach us that true bravery isn't loud or flashy, it's steady, resolute, and unwavering, no matter who's trying to intimidate you. And that's exactly why stories like these need to be shared. So here's what I want you to do. First, hit that like button. Every like helps these stories reach more people who need to see them and be inspired by the courage of ordinary soldiers doing extraordinary things. Then take a moment to share this video with friends, family, or anyone who loves history that's raw, intense, and real. This isn't just another story. It's a lesson in courage that deserves to be remembered. And don't stop there. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications because we have countless stories like this lined up. Tales of bravery, defiance, and moments in history that will leave you speechless. By subscribing, you become part of a community that honors these moments, celebrates courage, and never forgets the sacrifices made by those who came before us. So, do your part. Like, share, and subscribe. Keep these stories alive. Because if these moments of bravery go unseen, we risk losing a piece of history that teaches us more than any textbook ever could. And trust me, the next story you'll see here will be even more intense, unforgettable, and inspiring than this one.